my name's Danny Hopkins and I'm here at Britpart HQ in Shropshire with Managing Director Paul Myers. Hello, Paul.
Hi.
Here we have a Discovery 3 or Discovery 4 side step. Obviously they come in pairs. Paul, why should you fit Britpart side steps rather than something you find in an auto jumble?
We have these manufactured exactly the same way as an OE side step, so we have all the correct brackets, all the correct hardware, and the specification is perfect.
Brilliant. And of course you can fit them at home. And to show you how to do just that, here's Martin in the workshop.
A very common upgrade for Discovery 3 are side running steps. And there's a number of reasons for this. First of all, obviously, they let you get in and out of the car a lot easier. Secondly, they provide a level of protection for the doors and lower panels from other less careful people opening their door into yours. And thirdly, they just look really good. There are a number of kits on the market, but with the Britpart kit, you get proper load-bearing brackets, bolt up to the sills, so the steps can actually be used for their proper purpose and not just for cosmetic reasons. There's a little bit of stripping down to do. We've got to remove these plastic trims, but they're a fairly straightforward job that could easily be done at home. So let's get started. Right, so the first job to remove the plastic trim is there's two Phillips screws to undo from inside the rear wheel arch. And if you use a bit driver with a good condition, fresh bit, makes the job a lot easier because you don't have to remove the wheel to get a screwdriver in. So if we undo the screws, what you will find, especially if your car's a little bit older, is that the nut plate behind that the screw goes into will probably be very rusty, so you might have to just get your hand up behind the plastic trim and hold that steady to wind the screws out. So that's the first one. That's the remnants of one of the screw plates. As you can see, you have to replace that when you put the trim back on. There's the second screw out. So once they're out of the way, the next job is to release the row of plastic pin clips underneath the sill. So good quality metal trim tool to get them out. They have a centre part like so. You bring that out first, and then it can be a bit fiddly. The outer part will come out afterwards. And there's 8 of those to get out. Once you've done a couple, it does get easier. You sort of get the knack of it, but because they probably will have been in there from new, they can be a bit tricky to get started. It doesn't matter too much if you damage a couple of these bringing them out, because you'll have bolts going through some of these holes anyway when you fit the steps. Yeah, so it's not the end of the world if a couple get damaged, because like I say, some of these holes have bolts coming through them anyway, so you can leave a couple of the clips out. Both screws are out, all the trim clips are out. So the next thing is, there's a series of plastic poppers that hold the top edge of the trim onto the sill. So if we open this door, want to use a plastic trim tool for this, because otherwise you're going to scratch the paintwork. Nice big thick one so it doesn't snap or bend. Go in between the top of the plastic sill and the body and just lever it away, like so. And the trim clips will release, work your way towards the front. All the way along. You'll probably find that you get sort of 2 or 3 clips release at the same time, but that's okay. All the way along. So as you can see, the trim's come down a bit. You'll probably get a lot of mud and dirt falling out. So finally, you need to slide the trim backwards towards the back wheel, and it will unhook from the trim at the front, like so, and it comes off. So we need to cut holes in this trim for the brackets to pass through. So we need to clean it up first, because they're actually underneath all this mud. The locations for the holes we need to cut are actually marked in the plastic. So we'll head over to the bench and cut our holes now. Okay, so with the trim off the car, you'll be able to see that Land Rover have helpfully marked out where we need to make the holes for the brackets to pass through. We're just highlighting these in yellow so that you can see them properly. So that's where we need to cut. We'll then pop the centres out, and this can be offered back up. So in order to make the holes, the easiest way of doing it is by getting a nice big drill bit and drilling each corner of the trim, and then we join up all the holes with a saw. We've got an electric saw here, but you can just use a hacksaw if you've got one at home. So we'll do that now, and then we can continue with the process. So just going to make a hole in each corner, join them up, and pop the centres out of the holes. Again, these don't have to be perfect because the side steps will actually cover the holes anyway, so as long as they're big enough for the brackets to clear, you can get away with quite a lot when you fit these. Always wear glasses or safety goggles when you're doing this, by the way, obviously, so you don't get shards of plastic in your eyes. So it's helpful also to do a double hole where you need to start with the saw, just so you can get the blade in if you've got quite a big saw blade, like that. Okay, so we've then made, as you can see, got a hole in each corner. Just take the saw and carefully cut along the lines you've marked. Continue that. So where it's helpful to have a bench or something solid you can rest the trim on, so you can let the blade pass through without catching on anything. You want a nice sharp blade for this as well, because although it's only plastic, it does make the job a lot easier. So, one more to do. Ooh. And that's that done. Now all we need to do is get a Stanley blade or a nice sharp knife, clear up all this plastic, and then do the other two holes. So just go along, scrape all the excess off. Although you can't see it, you want it to be nice and neat underneath. So you can drop bits of plastic everywhere. Make another small cut there just to make sure this back edge clears, because I've not quite followed the line there. There we go. Once you've cleared up, deburred all the holes, you're ready to do the other two and then fit the trim. Okay, back over at the car with our trim. We've got our 3 holes cut out for the brackets. The last job we have to do to this before we offer it up is enlarge this hole, which is the second from the front, and these 2 back here, 2 rearmost holes, to 13 millimeters. And that's because the 2 of the bolts from the rear bracket and one on one of the fronts will actually pass through this trim and hold it in place. So I'm going to do that now. So then it's the second one from the front. That's just to allow the bolt to pass through a lot easier. So before we offer this up, just be aware there's 4 tangs at the front of the trim which need to locate into the front corner piece at the bottom of the front wing. They can be a bit fiddly to line up, so take your time. Don't force anything, otherwise you could break something. So just reach up and locate each one. That is home. So we don't want to actually clip the trim back on yet, because we need to feed our brackets up through the holes and get them loosely bolted to the sills. So we'll start that now with the front one. And you'll notice that each bracket for each side is different. So make sure you've got them in order before you start. Sort all your hardware out first, and then, depending on the age of your car, you may want to use a tap just to run through all the holes in the sill to clear out any rust or dirt. This is an M8 by 1.25 tap. And just run it. It won't actually cut a thread because the hole's already threaded from the factory. But if you just give it a few turns, let any rust and dirt out, bring it out, that'll make fitting the steps a lot easier. So the next job, we've tapped all the holes, cleared all the dirt and debris out of them. We've got the front edge of the plastic trim engaged in the bottom part of the wing. So now we can loosely bolt the brackets up to the sill. Now, it's important that these go in the right direction. This is the bracket that goes at the front. They're all a different shape. This is the centre bracket here. But it's very important, you can't get them wrong side on each sill, but you can get them wrong side to side, and then you'll go to fit the step and nothing will line up. So just offer each one up in turn, make sure all the holes match the holes in the sill, and you can't really go wrong. So each bolt you use will require a washer, and as we've already mentioned, 3 of the bolts will go up into the sill through the plastic trim, so it's important not to fit them until the sill trim is clipped in place. So it can be a bit of a fiddle to get the first bolt started because obviously you're contending with the plastic trim, but that's part of the process. And if you don't locate the trim in the wing first, then there's no way of getting it in after fitting the brackets. So just hang that one loosely to begin with. And as we cut, we drilled out the second hole to 13 millimeters because the bolt will pass through it. We aren't going to fit that bolt yet, we'll fit that last. So the frontmost bolt on the front bracket can go in, but not the second one. It's very important to start these by hand because if you go putting a ratchet or an impact gun or anything like that on them to begin with, there's a possibility you could cross-thread them in and then cause problems. So with the front bracket hanging loosely on the sill, we can fit the second one, which is this one. Again, you can't get them in the wrong order on the same sill, but you can fit them side to side. So just offer this up, wind the bolts in by hand, just so there's enough movement in the slotted holes for the step to settle when we offer that up. And then this one has 2 underneath as well. Just have to shuffle the bracket around slightly to get them started. They should all go in very easily, especially if you've cleaned the holes out with a tap. As you can see, there's a bit of front and back movement on the brackets just to help the studs in the step line up. And then the last one. Again, this does have a bolt that comes up through the plastic trim, which is, in fact, they both come up through the plastic trim on this one. So we're just going to fit these horizontal ones into the sill. Okay, you can see the movement there. Okay, so with that last bracket in place, we're going to pop the plastic trim up over the brackets, sit the steps on the brackets and align all the studs. We can nip the bolts up, make sure everything's in the right place. Okay, so with the step lifted in place, all the brackets will be lined up correctly with the studs on the step, and we can use a 13mm ratchet spanner just to ease this trim back and nip these horizontal bolts up into the sill so that when we remove this again to tighten everything for the final time, it'll all be in the right place. Okay, so with all the bolts tightened up or nipped up just enough to hold the brackets in place, we can lift the step back off and then fully tighten the horizontal bolts, fit any vertical bolts that we've missed, and then the step can go on for the final time. Now, with all the bolts that pass through the plastic trim, they have a spring washer, just to use as a little spacer, so that they actually don't crush the plastic as you wind them in. So don't forget to add them as you fit them. Okay, so now that we know that all the brackets are aligned correctly, we can go tighten all the horizontal bolts, pull the brackets up to the sills of the car with the vertical bolts, fix the plastic in place, and then fit the step for the final time. Right, all the brackets are finally secured, so we can now clip the plastic trim back on, shut the doors, and offer the step up. Just make sure along the top of the plastic that all of the little white and yellow clips line up before you press them home, otherwise you're probably going to break them. And just tap each one with your hand, like so, to join it back onto the sill. That's back. So shut the doors. And you can use any undamaged clips to fill the holes that aren't filled by bolts, just to secure the lower edge back to the car. Keep it nice and tidy. This is why it didn't matter too much if you broke a couple removing the trim, because there's 3 holes that are now filled by bolts. So it's not the end of the world. Get all them in. Once the trim clips are in, don't forget to refit your 2 screws in the back of the sill here to hold the back of the plastic trim. There's a rubber lip along the top edge of the side step. It's important to make sure that that folds under the plastic sill trim. So lift the step, line the brackets up, make sure that rubber lip goes underneath. Like so. Once the studs are in, you can get your smaller nuts and small washers. Start one on each stud. With the step in, all the nuts and washers started, you need a 10mm socket to tighten them up with. Now, as you tighten them, you want to make sure the step stays level with the side of the car and that this rubber lip doesn't poke out anywhere. So, and also that this centre ridge in the step aligns with the door gap between the front and rear door to give a good finish. So, do them all up gradually by hand. Make sure the gap stays correct. Adjust it if you need to. That looks good. And then give them all a final little nip with a ratchet. So they're all tight. This side is done. Just need to do the other side. Don't forget to check out the other videos for fitting accessories on the Britpart Workshop series.